Voilà. Merci beaucoup en tout cas à toutes et à tous d'être présents aujourd'hui. Merci beaucoup. Donc, on est réunis aujourd'hui pour une rencontre sur les mobilités et les collaborations avec l'Amérique du Nord. Ce webinaire est mis en place dans le cadre d'un projet de coopération qui s'appelle Pyrenart. C'est un projet qui est porté par 9 partenaires transfrontaliers entre la France et l'Espagne. Et donc ce projet a pour but très rapidement d'accompagner les petites et moyennes entreprises du spectacle vivant à internationaliser leurs projets. Ce projet a commencé en 2017 et puis il continue jusqu'en 2021 et puis peut-être, pourquoi pas, aller un peu plus loin. Voilà. Ce projet, il s'inscrit dans les valeurs d'Occitanie en scène qui sont voilà, des thématiques chères telles l'international et la collaboration. C'est pour ça aussi qu'on a mis en place une coopérative de projets européens et internationaux. Vous pourrez découvrir tout ça sur le site du projet, donc www.pyrenart.eu ou le site d'Occitanie en scène. Je vous donnerai tous les détails après ça. Un petit remerciement pour Marie Le Sourd, donc secrétaire générale du réseau international On the Move, qui m'a accompagné dans la coordination de ce webinaire. Je remercie également nos intervenants, intervenantes et notre modératrice, donc Marie-Folle, Mathieu Covey, Sabine Trégouët et Gilles Doré aujourd'hui. Je remercie également nos interprètes, donc Pascal Fougère et Rebecca Reynaud, qui nous accompagne aujourd'hui dans l'interprétation. D'ailleurs, petit point technique, si vous voulez suivre donc le webinaire en une langue, il faut cliquer sur votre un petit bouton qui s'appelle interprétation, que vous voyez s'afficher sur la barre. Donc vous cliquez dessus et vous choisissez donc l'un des deux canaux en français ou en anglais pour avoir l'interprétation simultanée. Si vous préférez avoir les langues originales, donc en français et en anglais, donc sans l'interprétation, il faut rester sur le canal désactivé. Voilà. Un autre petit point technique, c'est que nous allons vous envoyer un petit email de signature pour avoir une liste donc d'émargement qu'on aura à la fin. Merci de faire attention à votre boîte de réception et ou dans vos spams. Voilà. Donc, merci à toutes et à tous. Je crois qu'on a fait tout le point technique. Pardon, oui, juste les questions et réponses. Donc, vous avez une petite section Q&A ou questions et réponses. Et vous pourrez vous poser vos questions directement sur ce module-là. Voilà. Je vous laisse en compagnie de Marie-Folle. Merci beaucoup, en tout cas, encore une fois, d'être présent à ce rendez-vous.
Merci Riyad, merci pour cette introduction. So I'm going to switch to English so you can give a try also to the interpretation and be sure of what works and what doesn't, and raise your hand or scream in a digital way if something is not working. So first of all, thank you very much, Riyad, Bukhari, and Marie Le Sourd also for organizing this event today. We start a bit late, but that's not really an issue. I'm going to speed up my part and then we will have enough time to discuss with our panelists. What I wanted to say as well is that you can ask any question in English or in French. Unfortunately, I do not speak Spanish, so please translate to one or the other. I think some of our panelists might actually understand Spanish, but let's keep it to 2 languages for today. And as said, you can put it on the Q&A section, so we are sure to identify them quickly. Without further ado, I want to introduce this webinar today. We will first discuss with the panelists for about 45 minutes for the first, so until 5 p.m. CET, and then opening up to questions from all of you to make sure that we can dive into any aspect of cultural mobility that you want to discuss a bit further. So I am Marie-Folle. I am an independent cultural advisor, French myself, but I've been living abroad for a long time now. And I work in different disciplines, among which music and performing arts. And I must also say that I'm the president of the board of On the Move, the cultural mobility information network that is working together with Pyrenart on this event today. So as Riyad said as well, we will share resources after this webinar. So any website we mention, is any link, any document that will be talked about, you can access later on. Don't worry, we won't just drop names and things on you that you can't get back to. So this webinar aims to provide a contextualized way of looking at cooperation between Europe and specifically between France and Spain, which are the two focus countries of Pyrenart, to North America. And we understand North America as Canada and all its different regions and the US. So we will be looking at these different forms of mobilities and cooperation and collaboration with the perspective of three different speakers. And I'm really happy actually to introduce those three speakers because they bring really a round view around what is mobility, and they will really help you if you're not too experienced with mobility to Northern America on how to understand the different aspects of it. So first we have Sabine Trégouët, who is a representative of the Department of Art, Culture and Francophonie at the Consulat of France in Quebec City, Quebec, Canada. She is there since June 2019. And before that, she worked in different performing arts venues in France, in the region of Paris, namely. Sabine will be talking in French for interpretation later. So Sabine represents more the context of the consulate and as a funder and as a formal partner in collaboration. Next to Sabine, we have Matthew Covey, who is the executive director of Tamizdat in the USA. Tamizdat is a resource center and a legal advisory organization, and Matthew will explain way more about this. So I'm not really going into depth on that point, but you should know that Matthew has worked in many European countries, so namely Slovakia, Ireland, the Netherlands, Czech Republic. So as you can see, it's very diverse, and he's based in New York. He's actually an attorney at law and runs parallel to that Tamizdat as a resource and information center, who is also a member of On the Move. Finally, and really last but not least for sure, is Gilles Doré, who is International Development Director at CINARS. CINARS is a Biennale of Performing Arts in Montreal. Gilles has been in post at CINARS in this position since June 2019. But he has been active for more than 20 years in the performing arts community as cultural manager and international developer. He has worked with many different performing arts companies in financial director position as well as director. But he also worked as an independent consultant in the field of dance, theater and music. So there is really this rich expertise, and you couldn't dream of a better panel. Again, like I'm really thrilled to be sitting with these people today. So we have a representative of a consulate, a representative of a resource center and legal advisory, and a biennale. And as you can see, we are going to focus on performing arts in all different aspects of performing arts. And so what is interesting to discuss this topic right now, when we are all trapped at home in different forms of lockdown in a digital environment, is that mobility is still happening. Even so we are static, there is still this exchange happening. And I think it's important to reflect on what we are doing right now, what has been happening in the last year, but also what can we look forward to? What is it, without looking in a glass bowl and really thinking like, okay, I'm imagining this and that. We can already see how to continue collaborating, what kind of new ways have been tried out, and what our panelists really see as interesting models that could be ways for you to collaborate with North America, with either Canada or the USA. We will be also discussing different revamped and revisited format of collaboration, different hybrid formats. So things that we see happening between, well, within a French context, for instance, or within a collaborative context between France and Spain, it's also happening with a larger distance with Northern America. And I think this is something that's, that has affected our panelists themselves directly in the work they do, as well as the field more generally. So as I said at the beginning, I'm cutting short on my whole introduction and I'm going to jump right in with our panelists. Sabine, je voulais vous demander, pour switcher en français, je voulais vous demander comment le Consulat général de France à Québec a adapté sa mission, qui est principalement d'échange culturel et d'échange à l'international, vraiment dans le cadre de la pandémie de Covid, et donc notamment sur les aspects de financement, le soutien à la coopération et d'autres missions, soit bilatérales, soit multilatérales.
Oui, alors peut-être pour commencer, dire 2 mots de la mission du service culturel du Consulat général de France à Québec. Donc on travaille sur l'ensemble du Québec. Moi, je suis basée dans la ville de Québec, comme le disait Marie, mais notre action, c'est sur l'ensemble du territoire québécois. Donc notre mission au service culturel, c'est vraiment d'initier, d'encourager, de soutenir, d'accompagner tout projet d'échange et de coopération artistique et culturelle entre la France et le Québec. Donc ça se traduit évidemment par aider à la venue d'artistes français sur le territoire québécois, mais également d'intervenants professionnels. On travaille également à aider les échanges de bonnes pratiques entre structures françaises et structures québécoises. On travaille aussi à envoyer certains programmateurs québécois en France pour les aider à découvrir la création française. Donc voilà, c'est une mission très large de soutien à la coopération franco-québécoise. Et puis, petite précision aussi, il n'y a pas d'institut français au Québec ni d'alliance française. Donc c'est vrai que le service culturel du consulat a un rôle d'autant plus fort, à la fois de soutien financier, mais aussi d'initiative de certains projets lui-même. Sur les outils de financement qu'on a rapidement, il y a évidemment notre enveloppe à nous en tant que consulat qui nous permet d'accompagner directement des projets, mais il y a également un fonds bilatéral entre la France et le Québec qui existe, qui a lieu, qui sort, dont l'appel à projet sort tous les 2 ans, qui permet d'accompagner là des projets un peu plus structurants. Donc c'est là qu'on retrouve des projets de résidence, de co-création, des projets aussi parfois d'échange de bonnes pratiques sur des thématiques très diverses, de médiation, de transformation numérique, etc. Et donc dans ce cadre-là, comment nous on s'est adapté, alors par de plusieurs manières. D'abord, on a vraiment cherché à accompagner au plus près nos partenaires culturels québécois pour qu'ils puissent transformer les projets qui étaient prévus à minima, qui puissent garder le lien avec les artistes français et les diffuseurs français. Donc, on est resté très, très en contact, même si ça fait ici au Québec 1 an quasiment maintenant que les déplacements internationaux de français ne sont plus possibles. On a cherché à être vraiment au plus près des partenaires pour voir comment maintenir le lien, transformer les projets parfois en numérique. On a cherché aussi une deuxième manière de s'adapter. On a cherché à proposer des rencontres professionnelles en ligne. C'est ce qu'on a fait notamment lors du début de la pandémie au printemps dernier, ou par thématique, donc danse, cinéma, théâtre, mais aussi littérature. On a organisé des webinaires avec des artistes et des professionnels français et québécois pour les entendre sur quelle est leur situation, comment ils voient la suite de la coopération internationale, qu'est-ce qui est important pour eux, qu'est-ce qu'ils vont privilégier dans le futur pour préparer finalement le redémarrage. Et puis de manière un peu plus pragmatique sur nos outils de soutien et de financement. Il y a eu évidemment un décalage dans le temps très important de toutes nos subventions, un report à l'année suivante, beaucoup de souplesse de ce côté-là. Et puis de manière très pragmatique, mais je sais que c'est un aspect important aussi pour les compagnies, nos soutiens sont habituellement plutôt fléchés sur de la mobilité internationale. C'est vraiment notre cœur de cible habituellement. Donc, c'est-à-dire, on va soutenir concrètement le transport international, les billets d'avion, le per diem, les hébergements des artistes etc. Et puis là, on a décidé de transformer ça pour être capable de porter notre soutien sur des cachets d'artistes notamment, des frais audiovisuels, ce genre de choses-là, pour accompagner justement la transformation des projets, pour faire en sorte que lorsque c'est possible, lorsqu'on peut faire des projets à distance en numérique d'une autre manière, nous, on puisse accompagner cela.
Merci beaucoup, Sabine. On voit vraiment qu'il y a une réflexion pour repenser à continuer cette mission d'accompagnement. Je pense que ça, c'est vraiment un des takeaways qu'on peut avoir de l'année 2020. On voit vraiment qu'il y a eu des acteurs même très formels, donc dans le cas d'un consulat, des acteurs qui arrivent à repenser la mobilité. Thank you. I'm going to switch to Matthew, and because there is a link for me on this rethinking of mobility and rethinking how you support artists and companies and cultural professionals in this cornerstone of your work, which is mobility. So Matthew, as I said, I didn't introduce Tamizdat at all. So I mean, I'm leaving all of this to you, but Tamizdat focus on mobility of performers to the USA. That's vague enough still. How did you adapt to this new situation, both in your daily work, but also what did the people you work with do?
Right. Thank you, Marie. First of all, I wanted to say, and this is something, if you're working in North America, you're going to come across more and more frequently these days. I want to introduce myself by saying that I'm speaking to you from Woodstock, New York, which is on the unceded land of the Lenape people, and acknowledging this is the ancestral land of Indigenous people is an important social justice and decolonial practice that promotes Indigenous visibility. And this is something you'll increasingly see when you're working with North Americans these days, taking that moment out before they speak. So Tamizdat, the work that Tamizdat does historically has been, to put it most simply, to work to try to keep the US accessible to arts from the outside world vis-a-vis the US immigration situation, immigration practices and policies. I think it's pretty well known that getting people into the US to work is a challenge. And so Tamizdat has positioned itself as an advocate for the arts to work with the US government to make it easier when it's possible and sue the US government when it's not possible. So it's kind of a combination of collaborative and adversarial relationship we keep with the US government. We work with about 3,000 or 4,000 artists a year, getting them into the US. We provide a lot of pro bono legal assistance. We also do a ton of research and education regarding US immigration policy. And the work we do is predicated on this notion that the more people we get across borders, the more artists that we move across borders, the better. And we don't really think that much about how good the art is or what they do when they get there. We're just like, people moving is good. And I think that the big thing that we've been grappling with in the last 9 months is, first of all, the fact that people aren't moving. And so what do we do with ourselves while we wait for people to move? How can we continue this same project when people aren't moving? And the first thing we did when the COVID lockdowns came is we shifted the legal focus of our pro bono legal assistance services from immigration to digital rights, and did a quick retraining for the attorneys we work with to say, all right, you're not going to get immigration questions, but you are going to get performing rights questions. What are if you've got a venue or an artist who suddenly realizes the only place they can do their work is on YouTube, well, what are they going to run into when they start putting their stuff up on YouTube or on Facebook? Or what are the challenges for a venue to launch its own streaming platform? So we took all the resources that we had that were focusing on real humans and moved it into the digital sphere to try to help people grapple with the complexities of putting their art online. And that certainly kept us busy for the last 9 months, because while there's a lot of organizations, on the corporate side have dealt with this, what we discovered was that a lot of artists and a lot of smaller arts organizations really didn't have in-house expertise at all. And also, especially in this context, didn't have the money to go out and hire lawyers to help them figure out how to put their work online and how to keep their collaborations working. So that was the first major shift we did. The other things, very briefly, a couple of other things that we've run across is we've seen what mobility there is and the topic of mobility. While for us has always been a very political topic, that politics has become very charged. Following on the former administration in the US, we were spending a lot of our time grappling with the various travel bans, but they affected a very limited number of people. They affected artists coming to the US primarily from Muslim majority countries, but coinciding with the last couple of years of the Trump administration, we've seen the notion of mobility becoming much more political, and the arts world engaging with that politics. Certainly what you're seeing in the UK right now is an incredible politicization of the topic of mobility, and what Brexit will mean for artists and presenters who are trying to present international artists in the UK. So for us, it's been kind of a little bit satisfying because we think of it as a big political issue, and suddenly the rest of the world is kind of getting on board. They go, hey, wait a minute, this isn't just a bureaucratic issue. This is a matter of freedom of speech. This is a matter of mobility relates deeply to how we fight xenophobia and how we work toward a cosmopolitan society. One other quick thing that we've seen a lot is, and we've tried to be involved with, is supporting the growth of residencies. As it's harder for artists to move quickly, jump across the world and do a show in Toronto and then do a show in New York and then do a show in LA. What we're seeing is a lot of artists, in order to keep their collaborations going, tend to move and then stay for a while. So there's been a real, in the US at least, there's been a real uptick in interest in residency programs, and a lot of new ones are being created that help artists stay in one place. And part of what's interesting about that is that the interest in residency programs really aligns with two other important moves in the performing arts. One is the concern for carbon footprint of artists moving around a lot. If you move an artist and then they stay put for a while, that's obviously from a climate change point of view, from a carbon point of view, probably better. The other one is that I think there's been an increasing concern about the mental health ramifications of the touring schedules of a lot of artists. If you have to be on the road an enormous amount of the year, what that does to people's well-being. And I think increasingly over the last couple of years, and certainly under COVID, we're seeing the notion of the residency program as kind of the antidote to the touring schedule. Does that answer your question at all? Is that useful?
It does.
Okay, good.
It also gives a lot for the rest of the discussion. I think, there is a lot to unpack from what you just said, so I'm not going to try to repeat it. We all, have to process this a bit. But I think it's really interesting to reflect on the fact that we are not reinventing the wheel, and residencies have been there before, and the digital realm was there before as well. It's just like the importance it takes and how we rethink mobility in those terms is really interesting, and that's something I will come back to a bit later. Thank you, Matthew. Gilles, so like the CINARS Biennale for me, and I think for a lot of people in the audience today, it's this major event for Canada, for North America in the dance and performing arts. It's really this major thing that was supposed to take place in November. I've been working with performing arts organization, and it's like it's in their calendar years and years in advance. And I think with COVID, everyone was thinking, exactly a year ago, on a kind of, okay, it's temporary, it's a seasonal thing, we will manage, it will come true, it will be okay. So like the CINARS Biennale was supposed to take place in November. It has been like that for 36 years, to do it every other year. And like this is a major challenge to rearrange a Biennale. And that's a bit the question I have, like, how did you adapt your specific work yourself, but also CINARS in general to the current situation? both on the networking aspect of CINARS as on the showcasing aspect. Those are really just, it's cornerstone, like seriously, I'm still impressed of 2020 and CINARS. Yeah.
Okay, so as Matthew said, we're in America have this now new ways to acknowledge that we are migrants, even if we're here since many centuries. So first of all, we CINARS acknowledge that we are located in the territory of Tiake, Montreal, on the unceded indigenous lands of the Kanyen'kehá:ka, which is Mohawk Nation. I'd like to say also that I have this thought about all the migrant people all around the world that are stuck in their own territory. The world is changing, the frontiers are opening, and there's up to 270 million people in migration right now in the world, and things happening in the world. Okay, so you hear me, right? My name is Gilles Doré. I'm working with CINARS. Yeah, CINARS is established since 36 years actually. We were supposed to do actually a real CINARS in November, but in March, of course, all the frontiers were closed. We CINARS, we were actually at that time, we were in Africa, and we came back very fast to Montreal. We finished our trip. We were on the Maza. It's a platform in Abidjan. So we came back to Montreal very fast, and we were in quarantine for two weeks, and we realized what was happening in the world. And so we decided to, in a fast track, to send a survey around the world to get to know the perception of what's happening in the terms of in the population around the world stuck in their own territory. And we had the survey, and the people at that time, at 50 countries, answered the survey, and 850 people did the survey. And the people said that they were expecting a comeback in spring 2021. In the beginning, spring 2021. So we're about to begin to come back. This was the perception a year ago. And we asked, one of the questions was that we asked at that time is that, when do you expect coming back at the trip, on your trip for prospection? So professional going to different countries to find shows or to sell their shows. And they said in that survey that we were expecting the comeback to travel in 2022-23. So it was strange to hear that we had to postpone 2 years our natural activities to get in meeting with people. So it was very urgent for us strategically to keep the contact, of course, with the world. And thank God we have this, technology, which is the Zoom. It's natural for us now, but in March it was like, how does it work? Anyway, so now we're learning every week how the world is changing. So then also in May, we were all locked in our own city and in our own theater. Theater were closed, and the people were very upset about what was going to happen. So we decided at CINARS to do a special webinar, and we contact people from 18 countries in all continents, in Australia, in Asia, in Europe, in South America, to ask them what are the initiatives that the presenter are doing in May to reach their own public, so to how they manage to be active. And we send that to the world to say, you're not alone. There's initiatives around the world trying to find ways to keep on getting in touch with the public. So of course, what happened in the spring, by trying those activities, we learned how to cope with the fact that we were virtual, because the main issue, the main goal, the mission of CINARS is to support the effort of the exportation over the borders all artists, companies, agents, presenters, and cultural delegates. Those are the core professional type of people we want to put together. So it wasn't possible. So now I began to think about the fact that we support the effort of touring. Now the touring doesn't exist anymore. So I began to say, then if we're not touring, what's the main goal? What's the issue? And I began to think about the fact that we say mobility, we say touring, and then we say circulation. And I begin to say that circulation, it's a concept now, revised concept. Circulation can include touring, can include distribution, but circulation through the web is also a way to get to put our art's voice around the world, over the border. So it was important for CINARS also to keep having the voices of international, because in spring and in the last year, everybody's are looking to their local artists, and it's fine, that's fine. But we were afraid that by not only talking and helping our own national artists, we forgot that in a year or 2 years from now, the international touring will lower and the interest wouldn't be there. But the fears now, it's not there anymore. We know that people needs to get to know our neighbors. So the circulation, I think we need to talk about and consider that we are now developing a concept of circulation through the web, through virtual collaboration, through also having people around the world knowing their work and having them to work with us. We've seen artists that have been doing work through the screen, and also a circulation concept. The extraordinary concept of circulation happens 2,000 years ago and much more. The Greek wrote theater play that circulate 2,000 years. So it's a concept of circulation, of license of show, and also through the web. So what we did with CINARS in the spring, we said we were going to do the CINARS Biennale in November virtually. So it was very important for us to try to find ways to generate activities for what's in it for me, like a real active way to put people in contact and generate business. At that time, it was very important. And we saw that many platforms around the world went virtual. So we decided to say, okay, now that because we asked in our survey in March, what's happening with your touring? And the people were saying it's postponed or canceled. So it was urgent to try to put touring back to the calendar for next year. So we said, okay, call of application for touring postponed in 2022. So we present every day about 6 companies that have touring, international touring, not national, but international touring project. So we present agent, companies, and presenter were coming to listen to those projects going to March 2022 in Germany.
If I can ask, just because I don't think that
too long, right?
We are coming close to a bit long, but
okay.
Concretely, especially for people in the audience who weren't there, so it was you invited the artists and the companies to present themselves, not to show a captation or show a recording. It wasn't the artwork, it was talking and networking then.
Yeah, we asked the companies to present short video of 5 minutes and having discussion with an animator. We had also a platform which permit to have a virtual booth showing their works, and also having by doing their registration, you were able to also ask to meeting with presenters. So we had 288 presenters from 50 countries. From those, we had 121 presenters from North America, So we will do another one in May 2021, from the 24th to the 27th of May. In May, we will do another platform, CINARS platform, virtual. So.
And before I go back to the question I actually had scraped, did you get feedback from people about their participation? Were they happy? Were they in stress because it wasn't the Biennale they know?
Yeah, people, I think it's hard for me to say we were very good, but I think the impact was good because we had 763 registration, 288 presenters from 50 countries. We had 230 companies having a virtual booth, and we had about 200 and something of cultural delegation. And through the week, we had a week activities and B2B, a business to business meeting. We had a real show in a theater, live streaming, and also conference from all over the world, 7 conference with 35 speakers from all over the world. And we had an average all the time of 230 participants to our activities through the week. So I think it was a good one.
That is indeed quite a successful.
Yeah, and the conference around the world asked us consultancy how we set up our platform. So the APAP in New York took the same kind of and we're in discussion right now with Australia and also Fringe Denver and also in other countries around the world.
Thank you. Thanks, Gilles. It's indeed very impressive, because what I remember from 2020 is that your survey came very early on compared to everyone else. And that really helped to understand what was coming next and how to, I think like everyone can have their own experience, but I think the first months of lockdown, we still all thought it was temporary and we could readapt and we didn't have to make a drastic change. And I think your publication, this first survey, helps to switch this to switch the brain to something a bit more sustainable already in the thinking.
We've changed since last March. We changed, but I can send the survey to the participant if they would like to. Yeah.
We will. Yeah. Thank you, Gilles. Sabine, je voulais revenir aussi sur ce point donc de ce changement d'attitude et de ce changement de perception sur ce qu'est la mobilité, mais donc puisque c'est vraiment ce que vous financez, mais aussi sur les exemples de collaboration qui ont été développés pendant cette année ou qui vont être développés dans l'année à venir. Donc, est-ce qu'il y a des exemples intéressants dans l'espace québécois que vous seriez présenter à notre public?
Oui, il y en a quand même un certain nombre. Je vais en présenter peut-être 2 qui sont particulièrement franco-québécois et que justement nous, on a accompagné. Le premier, c'est un projet entre le nouveau théâtre expérimental à Montréal, qui est un lieu et une compagnie en même temps, et la scène nationale de Fort-de-France en Martinique, Tropicatrium. Donc, ces 2 structures travaillaient sur une co-création ensemble, sur un spectacle ensemble, avec une écriture à plusieurs mains, avec des auteurs et des autrices de Martinique et du Québec, et des comédiens également des 2 territoires, avec une mise en scène pilotée ici par un metteur en scène québécois. Et donc, ils avaient à peine eu le temps de travailler sur le projet lorsque la pandémie est arrivée. Ils ont eu toute une période où ils ont attendu que les frontières rouvrent, et puis, voyant que les frontières restaient fermées, ils ont décidé de réallouer l'ensemble des moyens qu'ils avaient pour cette co-création, pour la transformer. C'est-à-dire, ça devait être un spectacle de théâtre sur une scène à Montréal et en Martinique, et l'ont transformé en une création numérique. C'était très ambitieux parce que concrètement, ils ont réalisé des répétitions de théâtre avec le metteur en scène à Montréal en visio et une partie des comédiens en Martinique. Ils ont en fait filmé les scènes de théâtre sur écran vert. Et donc ensuite, ils ont fait tout un travail de scénographie virtuelle et également d'assemblage des images. Et c'est allé très loin puisqu'il y a quelques scènes qui étaient évidemment en duo avec des comédiens de Martinique et des comédiens du Québec. Et donc, ils ont réussi à reconstituer des capsules vidéo comme ça de théâtre en les ayant réalisées à distance. C'est évidemment pas la même expérience qu'un spectacle de théâtre en présentiel, évidemment, mais le résultat est vraiment très, très stimulant, encourageant et rend vraiment honneur à l'objectif qu'ils avaient, qui était justement de mélanger les langues, les différentes langues françaises entre le Québec, le créole, le français en Martinique, etc. Donc, c'est un projet qui, pour moi, est très réussi, qui a très bien circulé dans l'espace francophone et qui leur a permis de ne pas laisser retomber toute l'énergie parce que l'idée, c'était de se dire, si on reprend le projet dans 1 an et demi, mettons, finalement, les comédiens, il y avait tellement de personnes impliquées sur ce projet-là qu'il y avait aussi un risque que tout le monde soit sur d'autres projets.
Ouais, je trouve ça intéressant, juste avant de vous laisser continuer, ça reprend aussi ce que nos autres interlocuteurs ont dit, d'avoir tous ces projets qui ont été décalés ou repoussés en se disant oui, on fera ça la saison prochaine, puis c'était après l'an prochain, et il y a cet embouteillement complet, embouteillage complet pour la saison septembre 2021. Il y a tout, j'ai des festivals, mais toutes les semaines dans un pays différent, et encore, c'est en faisant une sélection, et je pense que il y a eu c'est un choix intéressant aussi de ne pas reporter et d'arriver à créer quand même et de créer différemment. On ne dit pas non plus que ce soit la même chose, mais il y a vraiment cette dynamique en effet.
Et voilà, c'est vrai que c'est des moyens aussi audiovisuels importants, des équipes, un lieu. Enfin voilà, c'est pas du tout anodin et cette transformation-là, elle se fait pas facilement, mais c'est un projet qui honore en tout cas cette démarche-là, je trouve. Et puis le deuxième projet que je voulais évoquer, c'est une résidence qui devait se faire entre un écrivain québécois et un architecte français, qui est un projet qui est porté par la Maison d'architecture des Pays de la Loire en France et au Québec, la Maison de l'architecture du Québec, avec donc cette idée-là que les 2 artistes soient en résidence en même temps et produisent une œuvre donc, à la croisée de la fiction, la littérature et le dessin, les arts visuels, l'architecture. Et donc, de la même manière, après avoir repoussé plusieurs fois les dates de résidence, ils ont décidé de faire une première étape de résidence à distance. Donc, l'artiste français s'est déplacé dans un lieu, dans sa ville, et pour être dans un autre lieu que son habitation. Et l'artiste québécois a fait la même chose. Et ils ont mis en place un protocole de travail avec des phases où ils travaillaient chacun de leur côté, des phases où ils partageaient ce sur quoi ils avaient travaillé dans la journée. Ils faisaient un retour l'un et l'autre aussi des territoires qu'ils avaient pu explorer, des dessins qu'ils avaient faits, des idées qu'ils avaient eues. Et ils ont échangé comme ça tous les jours pour essayer de construire une résidence à distance sur 15 jours. C'est un vrai défi, mais encore une fois, ce qu'ils ont réussi à faire là en 15 jours et de sortir donc une première ébauche de nouvelles graphiques est très, très encourageant. Donc voilà, c'est sûr, ça a demandé tout un travail de réflexion justement sur ces protocoles de travail, sur le contexte dans lequel on peut créer en ce moment. Mais il me semble que c'est un autre projet qui est quand même encourageant en termes de possibilités, de collaboration artistique malgré la pandémie.
Et je pense que c'est vraiment intéressant au point de vue de la co-création et de la collaboration au niveau artistique, de repenser la relation au temps et la relation à l'espace. Je sais, dans une autre discussion qu'on a menée aussi sur ces questions d'art du spectacle et du digital et donc voilà, de l'année 2020 et de comment on fait et how to cope, comme a été dit plus tôt, il y a cette idée aussi que le digital devient un espace à part entière, avec donc un mélange de 2 espaces physiques différents, donc puisqu'on est en train de parler des collaborations entre l'Europe et l'Amérique du Nord, et en même temps ce digital qui est un espace tiers et qui permet un autre type de rencontre auquel on n'aurait pas pensé initialement, mais qui est quand même une rencontre, quand même une co-création. Donc les exemples que vous avez donnés sont vraiment à cette intersection, voilà, entre les différents, ces différents espaces et temporalités aussi.
Peut-être pour ajouter rapidement, parce que je pense que tout le monde pense à ça, on sait tous qu'il y a aussi une forme de saturation du numérique en ce moment, que ce soit dans sa démarche individuelle ou que ce soit dans la démarche des spectateurs, mais beaucoup de projets qu'on a vus émerger aussi ici en ce moment, c'est d'investir l'espace public. Nous, on a accompagné une exposition de bande dessinée dans l'espace public qui exposait des œuvres d'autrices et d'auteurs français et québécois. Il y a eu une exposition des scénographies de spectacles passés par le Carrefour international de théâtre, qui est un grand diffuseur international ici, dans les vitrines du Vieux-Québec. Enfin, on sent aussi que ça, c'est une piste intéressante pour aller rejoindre un public qui passe déjà beaucoup de temps devant des écrans en ce moment.
Merci beaucoup, Sabine. I wanted to ask Matthew on this more business to business kind of aspect on which you work, so not directly necessarily with the audience, but I mean, we work a lot with conferences, with CINARS being one of them as a networking space, but this is what we do, I mean, showcase events, and this is where we exchange and we reflect. So I'm guessing you did a lot of this also in a new formats, in different formats, and I was curious also, especially in the territory of North America, so both for the USA and for Canada. Do you have any example that you would like to highlight on things that you tried out last year and you're like, yes, that's something to continue, that's really interesting, that's triggering, that helped me cope also, and not in a boring digital way.
Triggering in a good way, that is?
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
I think, you know, the second week of January, second and third week of January in New York City is what we have come to refer to as the Jan Arts event, which is at this point maybe 7 different conferences that all kind of happen at once throughout the arts. And this was a really fascinating. And so basically the idea is that there are the conferences that are involved is there's the arts presenters, the American Arts Presenters Conference. There's the Prototype Conference, which is for new opera, Chamber Music America Conference, Global Fest, and Wavelengths, which is a performance and panel conference related to world music. The Winter Jazz Festival happens. The International Society for the Performing Arts Conference happens. All of this happens at the same time. I'm missing something. What am I missing? Oh, the Ferris Festival, which is run by the venue National Sawdust, which is really interdisciplinary arts, and the Under the Radar Theater Festival, which is run by the Public Theater. All these happen at the same time, which is mayhem. And it's a very, very, very busy 2 weeks. But what was really interesting, 10 months into the pandemic, is it really was an incredible showcase of what all these different performing arts organizations and artists had come up with in those 10 months. Like okay, so this is our reality now. What do we do with it? And I can't even begin to summarize the kinds of innovations that we were seeing of how do you move performance into this. But there were a couple of themes that came up that were really interesting. One is the bright side of all of this, which is the realization that you can move that if you're going to use technology, then you're moving your platform to a global platform rather than the 50 people who can buy tickets to see this show. It's anybody who knows about you can see it, which is a fascinating shift for most artists to think about moving from a rarefied audience to. I mean, it's something that popular music already has gotten used to, but throughout the performing arts, it's something that was kind of new. And the other thing I think that was a really interesting, and this wasn't across the boards, but I think the use of gaming technology really came into play, both in very, very innovative. Everything from, you know, there was a Jan Arts Conference Center, which was effectively a video game that you would go into, you know, after the shows were over, after the sessions were over, you'd go into it and you had a little floating head and you could wander around and bump into other people and you could talk, and it was entirely unsatisfying from a conference standpoint, but it was also kind of like being at a conference. Like you could hear somebody talking over to the side and you could kind of wander over to them and kind of run into them in an awkward way, but then you could have a conversation. I had some actual real human conversations that were unplanned, and it felt like I was in a video game, but it kind of worked. so there's things like that, but obviously gaming technology was being used a lot in performance as well, and that was really fascinating. Again, I don't remember what your question was, Marie.
It's no problem. I think, I mean, for the audience, I think it was really interesting to know about, yeah, if you want to develop in the US, please make sure you end up in January in New York. I mean, that's basically the takeaway that anyone
that goes
needs
sort
to
of
have.
without saying. Yeah, that's the main thing. I think that it's you know, obviously if you're in a more commercial setting, what goes on in Austin in March with South by Southwest is indispensable. And there's a couple of, like right as we speak, the Folk Alliance conference is happening. And that's a really good conference to connect to with people within the folk world. And folk is very broadly defined at the Folk Alliance conference. But aside from, and there's a number of other industry conferences that happen over the year, and they've all pivoted, you know, heroically this year. Go ahead.
Did you see a lot of international presence? I mean, like you know a lot of people outside of the US as well. Did you see those people being present in those conferences, or was it really we go online but we do it for our local audience? I don't know. I mean, like, was it really international?
It was enormously international, and part of the reason for that, of course, is that there were people I hadn't seen who haven't been able to get to New York for several years, but you know, they don't have to fly now, so they were there. So yeah, it was an enormously international presence. I don't know if Gilles or Sabine, if you were involved with those, but those conferences, I'm sure you were. I can't imagine you weren't. But yeah, it felt almost more international than it did in person.
Nice, thanks a lot. Gilles, I had prepared a question and I can't even remember how to formulate all of this, but maybe just on the same way as what Matthew was talking about. Are there any new form of collaboration that you see happening? I mean, both outcome of the CINARS online version of November, that's something that you see that has developed from there, or also from this experience of other biennale that you attend, or biennale conference industry moments. Is there any format that you find also really interesting? Sorry, it's a broad question, but zoom in on whichever aspect you want.
Yes, there is. There's a, you know, the world is experiencing, you know, trying to still create and still be with the friends around the world or their family or searching for their peers. I'm trying also to find to answer in the good way with the people that are listening to us. I think I went to, you know, many of you guys that have been, you know, registered. I went to the registration list that I received, so I know a little bit about you in the Occitanie companies. And I wonder if you've been to America and toured already in America, because the world in America is different than in Europe in different ways. I don't know what should I say. There's many ways that people try to recreate. I can give you ideas. A Mexican theater used to perform shows in his theater. He was not able to do it, so he went on Zoom and with actors in Mexico in their own living room create theater show, and he sells show to his people in his city. And he found that most of the people that were listening to the theater piece through their screen last spring were not coming to the theater. So he developed new public. And we saw that around the world, that we get to bring people in those virtual activity that we never thought that it would be, because it's less expensive. And what he did, he asked two friends, dramaturg friends in Quebec, theater writer, to say, can I use your script? And he said, yeah, take it. With that, he created Quebec show with his Mexican actor. Another company in dance company in Quebec, they did a co-production 2 years ago with two dancers from Quebec, two dancers from France, and they were supposed to tour in France. So the tour was canceled, but what they did, they hired two dancers, so the dancer 3 and 4, in France, and he created a tour. Also an agent, what he did, he took in last spring the complete video of the show that he was trying to sell, and he sent it to his professional presenters in France, and he asked them, to the presenter, to send it to his abonnees. Est-ce qu'on dit ça, abonnees? His abonnés. And the abonnees wrote back to the presenter in France to say, I'd like to see the show. So then in spring, he created a tour of eight cities through this experience. We see also in Japan, like we're in discussion with people in Japan, they're doing residency through the web, like you just said. So there's many. We did a document last May, and I think you can, the participant can have a look at all of those texts, because I asked them to write the text. So we did a document, and there's about 18 people that you can find what they did.
No, it's
long.
No, please. I mean, I want also just to stress, we put it in the chat, but anyone who has questions, please ask them, or also raise your hand. I can also give you the mic if you want to speak directly. But if you don't, I will continue asking questions. So please interrupt us if you do. Yes, we do have one. I'm going to come to it in a minute. But yeah, indeed, Gilles, what you're saying and those different aspects, I think, I mean, those are really fascinating. And I think the discussion I've had, and it touches also on what Sabine was saying earlier, people are tired because they are on the same screen all day. And I mean, I've been in so many Zoom calls that I forget which one I'm in. And I mean, and especially when you're watching a play, at some point you're like, oh, I wish I could just have a bigger screen. I mean, just as a professional tip for all of us, do you switch screens, or do you watch performances somewhere else, or do you put headphones or no headphones? On the contrary, is there any way that you think should, as a professional, you should be looking at shows?
We've been experiencing this technology, and as I said, we create that platform in November because we said we're performing arts, we're a live event, so we should try to find activities that are closer to be an event right here, right now. So that's why we decided then to show streaming live with the world. And it was very, very interesting because we had about 180 people looking at a show, everybody on the same time. And they were chatting on the side, we were looking at a dance show, and people were saying, whoa, fantastic, from Philippines, from France, from South America at the same time. So it was very chilling it was very great but I think, like I read an article in France, the curve of interest to see live show streaming is going up. But after a certain time, we said, okay, been there, done that. I'm not into it anymore. Yeah. So we're going through that a year and a half, 2 years. We need to go through this. And we know also, that's why we did this conference concept in last November, that the people are fed up after an hour in front of the screen, so we create those events for an hour only, and then you can move on.
Yeah, I think that's a good example, and myself watching different shows within music more. Indeed, there is a time limit, just after which you just have to skip and do something else just for your own mental health. We were talking also about it earlier. So I have, as I said, some questions written down, but we have one from the audience, and I'm guessing this is pretty much for Sabine, but also for our other speakers, if you want. Sabine, donc, on a Marco qui nous partage une question sur les démarches administratives, mais surtout pour les questions financières. Donc, je vais lire sa question. Pendant la pandémie, pas facile pour maintenir notre structure associative en termes financiers. On est en train de réfléchir si switcher vers une boîte de prod qui puisse se charger de toutes les démarches administratives. Dans ce cas-là, est-ce qu'on est encore éligible pour des aides à la mobilité, pour des propositions entre le Canada et la Côte d'Ivoire en 2022?
Si c'est une structure française, et je pense que c'est le cas puisque structure associative, ça sonne très français. Oui, c'est pas. En général, en effet, les boîtes de production sont aussi des associations, donc il n'y a pas de problème du côté des aides à la mobilité a priori.
Marco, n'hésitez pas à lever votre main si vous voulez réagir plus avec Sabine sur ce point-là. Gilles, oui.
Just to add, I think we need to be flexible. Je ne sais plus si je dois parler français ou anglais.
Soit l'un, soit l'autre, tant qu'on
Okay.
ne fait pas un switch entre les deux en milieu d'une phrase.
I'll try to stay talking in English. So I think we need to be flexible and keep going as there's opportunity. We do not know when the border will be open or not. It might be in the summer. No, we don't think so, but maybe, whatever. And things will happen through the experience. So we need to be flexible. I doubt that the border will be open in May, right? It's like, we see the vaccine going, and it's like we expect to have most of the population be vaccinated. But through that, maybe we need to have a dialogue with artists and producers around the world to keep on, to, put some seeds. So then when the border will get to happen, we will change and we will shift. I think we will have a shift in our minding in the summer when half of the population around the world, I mean, it's delicate to say that Occidental and rich country will have maybe half of the population be vaccinated. So the shift will be there, in the summer, I think, in our minding.
Si je peux compléter par rapport à ce que vient de dire Gilles, moi je suis tout à fait d'accord et je le vois au sein du service culturel, par exemple, nous sommes des éternels optimistes et dès le début, on a toujours été dans refaire des scénarios, transformer, accompagner, peut-être dans 3 mois, ça va rouvrir. Alors, c'est vrai que depuis 1 an, la pandémie ne nous a pas donné raison, mais n'empêche que le fait de maintenir ce dialogue, de toujours projeter qu'est-ce que pourrait être la suite, a permis finalement de maintenir un lien, de comprendre vers où voulaient aller les partenaires, les artistes, ce qu'ils étaient prêts à faire, partager les bonnes idées qu'on avait vues. Et dès qu'il y a eu des micro-réouvertures, je pense à cet été par exemple, où il y a eu une possibilité de diffuser de l'art, même si les frontières étaient encore fermées, on a tout de suite pu être présent, montrer des choses. Donc moi, je crois beaucoup à, même si je sais que c'est épuisant, j'ai des festivals de cinéma ici qui m'ont dit qu'ils ont fait 42 scénarios différents pour la tenue de leur festival, mais je crois beaucoup dans ce dialogue permanent parce que pour le coup, si on arrête et qu'on dit on se reparle quand les frontières réouvriront, le redémarrage va être extrêmement long.
Je suis assez d'accord, mais il y a un point un peu technique et je vais passer en anglais pour ça. There is a bit of a technical issue when keeping the flow and keeping in contact and everything and starting up on the collaboration as soon as it's possible. I think, Mathieu, you know where I'm going with that. How do you manage to do this while also keeping all the administrative matter in check, especially visa processes or work permits or any kind of agreement you need to have as a company touring? I mean, it's, yeah, funding is a big part. You need to apply so much in advance. And we heard from Sabine, there is flexibility and funders are really mindful of that. But how do you see it happening for visa, for instance, for the US? Because we do need that.
I'm trying to think of the best way to answer that. This is obviously the visa the visa situation in the US is extraordinarily different than Canada and even and different than Mexico as well. So if we're trying to talk about all of North America, there are very different situations depending on where you're going. Canada has a remarkably reasonable and effective visa system. They will complain about it, but compared with what's going down south of the border in the US, it's a wonder of efficiency and logic. The system we have here in the US is not good, and it's not easy to work with, and it is expensive, and it is very slow. I think with the new administration, we're going to see it being less blatantly racist. I'm hoping it seems to, they've already rolling back some of the worst of the policies of the last administration. But that's not going to change the fact that it is an incredibly expensive and ungainly system. So what I would say, and we also are aware that US Homeland Security is going to be seeing a massive, overwhelming amount of work that it is not equipped to handle in the spring. So the real message is, well, it's two messages. If you are planning to do work in the US, if you're planning to bring artists to perform in the US in the fall, you want to be starting the visa process as early as humanly possible. I'm talking 5 months if you can. And be ready for it to not go as smoothly as you'd like. Of course, you can always pay lots of money and do it at the last minute, and it might work and it might not. But it probably will work, but it just gets more and more expensive the later you arrange it. So I think I think the main thing is just preparing as far in advance. But also the other piece, and this is important, and this is a very small detail about American visas, but it's also crucial in this time, and that's that US visas for performing artists are only issued for the period of time that you've demonstrated that the artist needs the visa. So if you've got a week of performances, you're going to get a visa for 1 week. So it's really important when you apply for a visa, but the thing about these visas is they can last for a long time. They can last for up to 3 years in many situations. So if you're going to be applying for a visa, it's really important in this period of time to try to get to work with your attorney or your agent or whoever you're working with to get the longest period possible, so that if you book something for October, and it's only a week of shows, and that falls through, that gets canceled because there's another spike or something like that, that you haven't spent all that money and all that effort to get a visa that you then can't use at all. You want to make sure that you've got a long duration on those visas so that if it gets rescheduled for the following May, that you still can use it. That was a really detailed answer, but it's an important consideration, because if you're going to spend $5,000 to get a visa, you want to make sure you're going to be able to use it. Gilles, it looks like you have a comment on this. No? It looked like you had some wisdom to add there.
Not really. Yeah, if you need to be well prepared. If you plan to have a tour in the US, you need to talk to specialized people in the work visa in the US. Yes, you need to consider at least a minimum of 6 months. And you don't have the control of the people in the government, of the federal agency that, analyzes the visa. So you can pay a lot of money if you're at the very last minute, but you may not have the answer, right, Matthew? So it's very delicate in terms of, be prepared for a long road. Maybe this might be 2,000 minimum.
Yeah, that's probably the minimum you're going to see out there in terms of working with someone credible. There's people who would do it cheaper than that, but I wouldn't work with them.
Okay, I'm just taking the word quickly. So we have one question directly, and I'm guessing it's about the US. So where can we find the process, the steps to follow to do this work?
I can answer that question, and I'm going to put it in the chat.
Thank you, Matthew. There was also another question earlier in the chat, in the Q&A, sorry, on the funding to Quebec. And I think, especially knowing our audience being mostly French, or for a big part French, there is a lot of question to Quebec. So I wanted to, just for everyone to know, there is the answer of Sabine directly in the Q&A, but I'm going to give the word to Sabine in a minute so she can get back to that. And this is something, I have to switch to French. C'est un point qui revient souvent dans les conversations qu'on a avec des compagnies françaises qui sont dans le début de mobilité, dans les premières, les deuxièmes mobilités, et elles sont très intéressées par la mobilité vers un espace francophone, parce que l'administration est plus simple, parce qu'au moins on comprend. Est-ce que vous avez des conseils de la part, du point de vue, de ton point de vue, Sabine, est-ce qu'il y a des conseils, des points à garder en tête, particulièrement dans les premières mobilités vers le Québec? Et notamment, j'ai envie de dire, dans une période Covid, comment on s'en sort pour commencer cette mobilité?
Vous pouvez contacter le service culturel du Consulat de France à Québec. C'est un premier conseil parce que, surtout si vous ne connaissez pas bien la scène locale, que vous ne connaissez pas bien les diffuseurs du Québec, que vous n'êtes jamais venu, si vous nous exposez votre projet, nous, on pourra mieux vous orienter déjà vers qui serait intéressé. Et après, je n'ai pas de conseil miracle. Pour la diffusion, les enjeux sont les mêmes que de la diffusion locale, c'est-à-dire bien se renseigner sur les structures que vous contactez, sur la taille de leurs espaces, leurs priorités stratégiques avec qui ils ont l'habitude de travailler. Est-ce qu'ils ont les moyens financiers de programmer des compagnies internationales? Est-ce qu'ils l'ont déjà fait dans le passé pour adresser des demandes qui soient ciblées et qui fassent sens pour ne pas perdre d'énergie? J'aurais tendance à vous dire aussi de ne pas hésiter à regarder sur le Canada anglophone aussi, du côté du réseau culturel français. Il y a aussi tout le réseau des alliances françaises dans le Canada anglophone qui ont des structures très différentes, mais certaines ont des vraies programmations avec des salles qui peuvent accueillir des spectacles. Donc voilà, et puis après pour des projets de partenariat qui sortent un peu de la logique traditionnelle de la diffusion, on a aussi des outils, nous, de financement qui permettent d'amorcer des nouvelles coopérations. J'évoquais en début de webinaire rapidement ce fonds bilatéral qui existe entre la France et le Québec, qui soutient d'ailleurs un projet d'échange entre Occitanie en scène et Réseau Scène. Et bien, sur ce fonds-là, on a une enveloppe dédiée qui s'appelle le fonds Émerillon, qui permet de faire venir, par exemple, un directeur de lieu ou une directrice de lieu ou de compagnie au Québec pour ce qu'on appelle une mission de prospection, pour repérer. Il a eu des contacts déjà avec un partenaire, mais ils ont besoin de se rencontrer, de comprendre le territoire l'un et l'autre pour s'engager sur des projets un peu plus structurants. Donc ça, c'est des choses qu'on peut accompagner aussi. Donc voilà les pistes que je donnerais.
Merci beaucoup. Je pense que ça aide vraiment. Il y a ces différents aspects de mobilité, donc d'une part de la prospection, du repérage, d'arriver à comprendre qui sont les acteurs, et après, plus concrètement, de faire les démarches pour les financements et pour toutes les questions que tu as mentionnées au début, Sabine, sur est-ce que les partenaires que j'ai, les partenaires que je trouve au Québec ont les moyens de me faire venir, quelles sont leurs tailles, comme pour toute coproduction quelque part, mais vraiment poser ces questions, je pense, en avant et en amont vraiment du plan de mobilité et du plan et même de coproduction en ligne. Je pense que c'est vraiment important d'avoir tout ça en tête et d'en discuter. Et il y a beaucoup de ressources sur ces points-là, notamment via On the Move et via les partenaires qu'on peut avoir. Gilles, do you have points to add also on this first mobility? And I'm going to bring in also the question that was asked in the Q&A. What structures can concretely help you to program and to help... Sorry, je vais la lire en français, comme ça, au moins, ce sera plus simple. Sorry for that. Quelles structures peuvent concrètement nous aider à programmer et distribuer les spectacles de notre compagnie française en Amérique du Nord?
Donc, to answer this question, I need to get to know the experience of that company or the community that are listening right now, because there's so many ways to answer that. First of all, international development needs years. For myself, when I was working on the field, directly on the field, I was telling to younger coming in the field to say, for the best way for myself, I need to meet the same person 3 times, and especially in the same year. This means that the first time you might, when we were in live meeting, let's say you meet someone and you talk maybe 2 minutes to 5 minutes. And the very first, it's just introduction. And you say, okay, I'm in the dance field, contemporary, interdisciplinary. Oh yeah, and you're based in where? You're a programmer. Okay, you're based in Chile. Okay, and so 5 minutes done. The second one, you might meet the same person 6 months later if you travel. And then you will say, I've seen you somewhere. like what happened with me and Matthew just in the very beginning when we, I've seen you somewhere. Yes, where? Okay. Oh yeah, you're into interdisciplinary dance field. Yeah, and you're in Chile. Yeah, and the third time you will remember the person, and you will remember, and you will go into the company. It's an average. It takes time. And you need to consider that for a development, for a new territory, you need at least 3 years, because you need a year to get to know the person or chat with him through now Zoom after you meet the person. And the presenter, if you meet the presenters in November, he might have space for the next year's season. If you meet this presenter in April, next year it's full. His season is full. So you're talking about the years 2, but it might go to the years 3, so you get a real connection. So I can give you, I can put the link of, go showing you some presenters that were on the last CINARS web to get to know what's the average, what's the type of the people that can help you. It's going to conferences to get to know presenters. Est-ce que tu veux que je partage mon écran pour montrer? Non, hein?
Oh, ça va vraiment aller dans les détails, mais je pense qu'on a ce qu'on va faire, c'est après ce webinaire avec Riyad, on va envoyer les ressources, on va les partager, et notamment aussi ce qui a été noté dans le chat, notamment avec Sylvain Cornio aussi, qui partage de très bons conseils, et tout ce qui a été échangé, toutes les ressources que Marie Le Sourd a ajoutées aussi, pour en effet aider à ce défrichage et à comprendre aussi comment trouver ces contacts. Mais en effet, ce que tu disais, Gilles, oui, les échanges internationaux prennent du temps. Oui. Et ça c'est comme ça. Mais pour reprendre la question, je pense qu'en effet, la question de Victor, donc d'une part, il y a en effet un besoin de temps, mais il y a aussi ces conférences professionnelles, ces moments de networking qui paraissent un peu abstraits à premier abord, mais c'est comme Avignon peut l'être, comme d'autres conférences en Europe peuvent l'être, comme d'autres échanges peuvent l'être. Sont des moments où la première fois, c'est un peu difficile de faire un repérage et de comprendre comment ça fonctionne. Et en y allant, et je pense que justement, en essayant cette année avec toutes les options qui sont en ligne, ça permet aussi de comprendre un peu mieux les dynamiques qu'il y a. Je pense que...
sous toute réserve, nous autres, à CINARS, on le fait avec des compagnies québécoises et on les amène à travers le monde. Et là, cette philosophie, c'est de travailler en synergie avec des seniors et des juniors. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a une introduction de savoir comment cheminer, parcourir des conférences en live. Et quand tu sais parcourir des conférences en live, ben, tu es plus apte à pouvoir parcourir des conférences virtuelles. Et j'ai entendu dire que les jeunes qui ont participé à des conférences virtuelles ne savent pas par où commencer. Donc, on pense maintenant à faire des accompagnements aussi pour les professionnels qui débutent dans le développement de la plateforme CINARS Web. Parce qu'effectivement, ça prend un accompagnement.
Oui, non, et ça
accélère le processus. Ça accélère le processus, en fait.
Tout à fait. Sont des points même de ce qu'on appelle le mentoring ou le parcours d'accompagnement pour l'international. C'est vrai que c'est d'être guidé et de comprendre et de savoir comment utiliser toutes les fonctionnalités aussi d'une conférence, même en personne. Généralement, on reçoit une liste de délégués qui va faire des pages et des pages et savoir comment la lire, savoir qui contacter en amont du rendez-vous, ou alors de prévoir des rendez-vous en personne ou juste d'envoyer un mail pour faire connaissance. Donc, il y a tous ces processus et je pense qu'en effet, si vous avez la possibilité d'être accompagné pour ça fait vraiment une différence. Gilles, oui.
Une chose, c'est une conférence virtuelle qui est bien construite. C'est une conférence qui va permettre, avec la technologie, de segmenter l'identité professionnelle. C'est-à-dire que quand vous vous inscrivez, ça permet de dire « Je suis un artiste qui est dans le domaine de la danse et qui est dans des petites salles, par exemple, expérimentales. » Et donc, chacun des professionnels son identité et il y a un algorithme qui permet de faire un regroupement de personnes qui ont les mêmes intérêts. Ouais. Donc, ça accélère la mise en contact entre professionnels.
On arrive vers la fin de cet échange. Je vais juste reprendre une dernière question qui est assez précise dans les Q&A. Et j'espère, Victor, qu'on a répondu à votre question. Marco posait aussi un autre point, disant qu'ils sont en train de suivre des conférences du MICC pour faire du réseau. Donc, il y a pas mal d'échanges aussi. Et je pense que les autres compagnies françaises que vous connaissez ne sont pas nécessairement seulement à voir comme une compétition, mais aussi comme des partenaires pour justement cette exploration à l'international. I'm going to switch to English one last time, Mathieu, because you're an expert that if people don't know you, they're really lost. So I'm just taking advantage of you being here today. The question is about the visa for touring to the US in May 2020 from the Compagnie d'Autre Cordes. They noted that there was no possibility to report the date of their visa, but it is possible to have a reduced fee for the next application. Is that the case? Can they contact you? What happens with what was postponed in 2020?
Unmuting. There we go. Unmuted now. There's no good news on that right now. As it stands, the visa term that you got last time is the visa term that was given by the government. And you will have to start the process over again. That being said, Tamizdat is working with the League of American Orchestras and a number of other organizations and the U.S. Homeland Security Ombudsman's Office to try to push through a proposal that will allow arts organizations who had visas that they couldn't use to change the dates on that. I don't at this time know if that's going to work. It's a big ask. It's a lot to ask of the U.S. Homeland Security right now when they have a lot of things to worry about besides artists. But I am hopeful after our last meeting with the Ombudsman's Office that there may be a possibility that this proposal may work through in some way. So stay in touch with, if you're in that situation where you had visas that you couldn't use, stay in touch with me. Hopefully in the coming months, we'll figure out a way to get those dates changed. I don't know if it'll work, but we're working on it.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Mathieu. Because of time, I don't really dare to ask more questions, and I think we could go on for a very long time. What I would really like to say to everyone who attended today is to check out everything that Riyad will be sending afterwards, because there is really a huge amount of information between the speakers that we have today. The organizations that they work for are really outstanding, and just really, really check them out and see also the partners that they have, because, or the networks are part of, because you were asking about how to find a structure, find a partner in North America, and through CINARS and the partners they have, through the Consulat and the organization they work with. The same with Tamizdat, where they have speaking engagement, the different conferences that were mentioned today. Those are your entry points to Canada and to the US. This is, if you need the first ID, this is really the way. Marie Le Sourd also mentioned the mobility funding guides. Those can help to figure out which organization can support you for funding. The mobility funding guide for France will help you see also what organization would provide financial support for touring and residency and so on in North America or with North America. So that was it from my side. I want to thank the speakers very much, and I will give the word to Riyad to close this meeting. Thank you all.
Merci beaucoup, Marie. Alors, je crois qu'il y a un petit souci avec ma caméra. Donc, les petits soucis techniques s'accumulent un petit peu. Voilà, j'arrive doucement. Voilà, je suis là. Merci beaucoup, en tout cas, à Marie d'avoir modéré ce temps très riche en échanges. Merci à tous nos intervenants et intervenantes. Merci à Marie Le Sourd aussi qui m'a aidé à coordonner ce webinaire. Merci à nos interprètes aujourd'hui qui ont fait un travail formidable. Je voulais juste voilà, donner un petit point technique. Donc, il y a eu un petit souci technique. Donc, nous étions tous réunis sur Zoom puisque ce n'était pas live streamé sur les réseaux sociaux. Mais cette rencontre a été donc enregistrée. Elle sera disponible ultérieurement en 3 langues, donc en anglais, en français et en espagnol. toutes les ressources, les liens et les documents qui ont été partagés seront centralisés et envoyés à tous les participants. Voilà, donc je crois qu'on a tout dit. Merci beaucoup encore une fois à tout le monde pour ce temps très très riche. Voilà, je vous enverrai un mail très rapidement et moi je vous dis rendez-vous dans 2 mois, donc le mercredi 21 avril, toujours sur Zoom pour continuer cette conversation, mais on va un petit peu descendre un peu plus vers le sud des Amériques, puisque nous aborderons ces collaborations avec l'Amérique centrale et l'Amérique du Sud. Voilà. Merci encore une fois à toutes et à tous pour votre présence et tous ces échanges, et je vous dis à très vite.